And our last speaker before your participation at the microphone is Tricia Baptiste of Honor Ministries and Eve.
I want to start by saying what I think is the obvious, which is sex is the most fun two people can have together when it is between consenting adults. But what happens to sex when we allow men to use their money to buy women's consent? What happens when a segment of the population, oppressed because of their very gender, who in some cases lack the basics, are offered money for sexual access to their orifices to survive, or perhaps even to find a way to get ahead? Can we just start off, can we just all agree that men are the dominant gender? So do we think it a sign of an egalitarian society when they can use that privilege and their money to demand the sexual and social subordination of women, so women can be used as their masturbation toys, in which men can be guaranteed at all times to orgasm exactly how they want? I think having a sex-positive attitude means that people cannot pay for sex to make sure that sex stays between consenting persons. And I think we need to call prostitution what it really is, which is violence against women. Calling that is not wrong. It doesn't mean I or whoever else tackles this subject is anti-man or anti-sex. It may seem a little harsh, but in my 15 years of being a prostitute, it was men that bought me. This is a very gendered issue. I have been told by some that there is a societal fear that by not supporting the pro-legalizing prostitution agenda, one might be labeled unhip, unliberal. One called herself a fuddy-duddy. Trust me, you wouldn't be any of those things. We just need to name prostitution for what it is. Naming it, calling it violence against women and an attack on women's equality allows us to name the injustice that we have to fight against. Supporting the criminalization of the demand of prostitution, which is referred to as the Swedish model of law, or as of late, the Nordic model of law, which calls for an end to the commodification of women's bodies, is pro-women and pro-equality. In his book, The Johns, by Victor Mallorik, he notes a 2006 British study in which 207 women from 14 countries were interviewed. Almost 8 in 10 had been physically attacked by a long lineup of assailants: traffickers, pimps, brothel, club owners, and johns. 90% had been forced or intimidated into performing sexual acts. 61% had been threatened with weapons. Legalizing or decriminalizing the male demand will just institutionalize the ongoing abuse women suffer. It will turn pimps into businessmen and johns into customers. A thought I hope we are all equally repulsed by. If this is an injustice and an equality issue, let us look at the safety we offer women. Condoms? I know for me, I wasn't really empowered when they were handed to me. Perhaps it helped keep me physically safe, but it did nothing to stop the erosion of my dignity or my humanity. To me, it seemed to say, this is your lot in life. And I accepted it for far too long. I also understand that on the back of the collective guilt of the serial killer we have, who killed many of my friends, society really wanted to help the vulnerable. And with the Olympics looming, we were offered a brothel as an idea. But if we have a brothel, will it keep women safe, and who will benefit from it? Unfortunately, the most vulnerable and at risk would not get in the front door due to addiction issues and health issues. So pimps would benefit now that their inventory, for that's what they call their women, are indoors. They no longer draw the wrath of all the NIMBYs, all the not in my backyards. Organized crime and traffickers would benefit as well. If prostituted women are kept indoors and it's licensed, why would the police interrupt the business? I suppose the Johns would benefit as well, for we sure go to great lengths to keep their identity a secret and to make sure that their safety is ensured. Women are made to get health checks. We must register and get a license. Can we make the men get licenses to be safe Johns? Can we make the men get health checks to keep me safe? I'm going to probably go with no on both counts. So how does this benefit the women? Apparently, by moving the abuse indoors, it'll make it safer for the women because there can be monitors and safety buttons in the room. But let's be clear, it is the actual penetration of prostitution that is the violence. I'm not sure if you have been raped, but I have many times. For in my world, it was just a job hazard. And someone barging in the room to stop it would not make it an unrape. Someone busting down the door to stop a John while he is beating me does not make it an unassault. So again, it would seem that mostly men benefit. And by keeping the discussion going about how to minimize the violence and harm, we are still not challenging the real issue. Should men be able to pay to sexually access a woman's body? Prostitution commodifies women's bodies, which is sexual and social subordination, wherein all women are seen as a subclass of human beings. Tolerating prostitution affects everyone because the inherent inequality in prostitution becomes a reference point for social and sexual relations which are not rooted in fairness, equality, or respect. Countless men bought me knowing I would never be with them without the money in my pocket. And I tried so hard to believe that by choosing who raped me based on their ability to pay, I would be empowered by it. That by consenting to the abuse, somehow I was free from it. That by caving into the demands of patriarchy and working hard to look like they wanted, talk like they wanted, and when I submitted to sex on their terms for which I got money, that somehow I had bested them. And I was now in control. But I was not. For I remember how much I flinched when they moved too quickly, how I would lay under them and would try to be anywhere else in my imagination, how they always seemed to have a sob story for why they needed to buy me, but my sob story of not wanting to be underneath them, to not have them in my mouth, was never as urgent a need as theirs. So when do we say to men, enough? Understand, it's not flirting I'm talking about, nor is it the titillating excitement that happens between the genders that leads to the really fun sex that I mentioned before. What we are saying enough to is the sexual insubordination that prostitution demands. Sex is just more fun when both people have equal input and both derive pleasure.